Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to this critical discussion of decolonizing media, a 10 media production. Sorry, I'm getting some background noise. My apologies. Decolonizing Media, a 10 media production. Today, we gather not merely to speak, but to disrupt, to dismantle the narratives that sustain empire, occupation, and the erasure of oppressed voices. In a world where media is too often a weapon of imperialism, we seek to reclaim it as a tool for liberation. Our guest, Miko Peled, a voice of courage and clarity in this struggle. We are welcomed. Born into a prominent Zionist family, Miko's journey from the heart of Israel's military elite to a steadfast advocate for Palestinian liberation is a testament to the power of decolonial transformation. His work challenges the very foundations of Zionism as a settler colonial ideology, exposing its ties to democratic fascism, a system that masks its violence under the guise of democracy while perpetuating apartheid and displacement. Today, we will confront the role of media in legitimizing these structures of oppression. We will ask, how do we dismantle the narratives that dehumanize Palestinians? How do we combat the imperial frameworks that sustain Zionism and other forms of colonial violence? And how do we build a media landscape that centers and creates voices of the colonized, the marginalized, and the oppressed? This is not a conversation, it is a call to action. So let us begin. Welcome, Miko. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Yes, so let's start off with your book. I just want to say, thank you for coming on. This has been a conversation that I had written down for quite some time, and I'm glad that my network has been able to reach your organization, because I think it's very important for us to understand the complexions of decolonization, and how there are different forms of decolonization and what that looks like. And I think you're a very, very prominent example of when you're taught something growing up, and then you kind of see, that it's been a farce, it's been oppressive, it's been genocidal. Most people don't take that next step of trying to outlearn or trying to unlearn the things that they have been told. So I just want to say, one, you are an example and a beacon, of hope and of change for a lot of people that are questioning whether they're Israeli, or whether they're Zionists, on how they should perceive the world, which where they're perceiving it at is not true. Your book goes over this journey that you went through, and so I wanted to start off with a quote from your book that says, "It became clear to me that the young woman that I saw on the stretcher while watching the news was indeed my niece. This wretching tragedy is the starting point of my personal journey that transformed my heart and ushered me into a life of activism and, some say, risk." Could you just break down your journey from where you started to where you are now, and how it's transformed not just yourself, but also the organization that you are heading?
Wow, that's quite a start. Yeah. Thanks. First of all, thanks again for having me, and that's quite a quote to start with. But I think it's a very good choice. I don't think I've ever been had that like read that particular part read back to me like
Wow.
that.
Wow.
So yeah, I think it's great that you did, because the I think the sad reality that we exist in is that what prompts us as people to change the way we view the world, to change our ideology, to change our, or to even just to examine our values is something terrible. It's usually a tragedy, something horrible that we have to experience that forces us to go through that process. And in my case, that description, that was the moment, that was the tragedy that forced me to do just that. So I was, I was raised in this what is known today as kind of a liberal Zionist environment. So very, very Zionist, very dedicated and patriotic, dedicated to the Zionist project, and patriotic as somebody, a son of a general and a son of this land, of the country, of the project. Um, so having been raised that way, and then moving out of it and somehow being open to the possibility that there's another story and that story has legitimacy. And what's interesting is when you're raised as a liberal Zionist, in many ways you're less open because you're liberal. So you are kind of okay. You may be a Zionist and you may be, part of this, very militaristic and almost fascist regime and existence, but you're liberal. So you're not quite as bad as some of the others. So you feel like you're on the right track. And then suddenly to be confronted with a completely different reality and confronted with the idea that, number one, not only you do not have full possession of the truth, but that the truth is diametrically opposed to what you believe it is. That is that's quite a shock to the system. And I think it's thanks to the patience and generosity of the Palestinians with whom I engaged initially, and this was actually in the United States, and some were in Palestine, but many of them were here in the United States. It's thanks to them that I was able to walk through that no man's land, if you will, of uncertainty and kind of limbo, and come out on the other side, sane, I suppose is the word. It's really thanks to them. And then once you cross that path, once you begin that journey from a space that feels very safe and very normal to the space of the colonized, you begin to see things and you can never unsee. And then in my case, I was eventually faced with, I was at a crossroad. I was faced with a choice I had to make. You can't remain loyal to Zionism and at the same time believe in justice and freedom and so forth. It doesn't work. You have to make a choice because these are two contradicting and opposing actually concepts. Zionism is racist, it's violent, and of course freedom and liberation are the opposite of that. So, and again, thankfully I had the support and the inspiration from these newly made relationships with the Palestinians that allowed me to do that and engage in this work to the point where I don't look back. I mean, I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me, of course.
Yeah, and speaking, like how you said, the best thing that's happened to you, I think for a lot of people that have been in your position, they would probably result to saying that, meaning that they're no longer indoctrinated. They're no longer following a false ideology. They're no longer complicit via whether it's mentally they feel complicit, whether it's physically complicit, as we know that, at the earliest you could be a part of the military is 16 years old if you have any type of volunteer from your families. I truly believe that we're living in a time period now where people want to act like we haven't been experiencing already a two-state solution in Palestine, meaning that there are two entities there, one of which does not want the other entity there, the other which that tries to masquerade like they're democratic and they're just, when we all know that they just want to eradicate everybody there for the betterment of imperialism. What do you say to those that want a two-state solution, even after just recently, last night and early this morning, we can count over 420 Palestinians that have been massacred, the continuation of this genocide and ethnic cleansing? What do you say to those people that still believe a two-state solution is even something that's logically moral?
I wouldn't know what to say. I think the two-state solution, I mean, what do you say to somebody who's, it's either the two-state solution is something that's still being argued by people who are either really ignorant and just don't know, which I suppose is legitimate, or by people who understand that the two-state solution is a fig leaf that allows the genocide to go on and pretends that there's some kind of a liberal, peace-loving Israel out there somewhere, and the two-state solution will allow us to find it. mean, the two. First of all, I don't know what the virtues are of a two-state solution, so I don't even know why people talk about it. I'm really not. I don't understand what are the virtues of this idea. Second thing is, if we have a two-state solution, the way it's presented, one side is supposed to accept a small fraction of the country, while the other side enjoys the lion's share. And there's some kind of an understanding that it's the Palestinians who need to accept the smaller share, while the Zionist settlers get the lion's share of the country. And I ask, how has that been determined? Why is that the case? Maybe it should be the other way around. I mean, how is that? How do you determine who gets what portion of the country?
Mm.
And why is it so accepted that Palestinians need to be the ones who accept a tiny fraction of their own homeland, particularly since we know Palestinians make up the majority of the population on all of historic Palestine? And then the third point on this issue is, how is it going to happen? How is it going to work? There is no West Bank. There is no West Bank. The entire region was completely integrated into the rest of the country, into the rest of the apartheid state. They have cities and towns and highways and schools and shopping malls for Jews only in what used to be the West Bank, with the exception of what they call pockets of a hostile population, which are ghettos in which 3.5 million Palestinians have to live. These are ghettos. So how is a two-state solution going to happen all of a sudden? So in any way, when you start to analyze and break down this idea of a two-state solution, you very quickly realize it's a lie. It was a lie created as a fig leaf to allow the expansion of the apartheid state throughout all of historic Palestine. Anybody who still wants to talk about it, and again, I've heard people talk about it and ask about it because they really didn't know. That's all they ever heard. So fine, that's a legitimate conversation. But when people say it who do know, then it's obvious that they're just perpetuating the lie. The lie that somehow there can be some legitimacy given to the apartheid state, and of course, I believe we have to reject that.
Yeah, and it's equivalent. I mean, me being Afro-Indigenous, when I hear two-state solution, I automatically think of what we classify here in the occupied territories of Turtle Island as reservations, as concentration camps. Is what you're alluding to, is that I have to share something that was never yours to begin with. And you're trying to use thousands of years or portions of the Bible, portions of the Torah, to try and justify this extermination. You're using also the words of someone who was an atheist, who did not even believe in Judaism, and was, I mean, the letters from Theodore Herzl to Cecil Rhodes automatically put Zionism where it should be, is that it's a act of colonialism. It's an extension of colonialism. As an Indigenous person, it would be ignorant. It would be I would be an ignoramus if I decided to oppose the sovereignty of other Indigenous people and my Palestinian brothers and sisters abroad. So when I hear the two-state solution, I completely agree with you, is that you're perpetuating what you already know to be something that is a fallacy, that is rooted in ignorance. It's rooted in the same colonial aesthetics that you think that you're fighting against when you say that you want a two-state solution. And like how you said, it's a fig leaf. And I don't see it in any other stretch. Moving on.
Let me just make another point on what you just said. I was in Richmond, Virginia a few weeks ago, and there were some Indigenous people in the audience, and in the Q&A, this one wonderful young activist stood up and she said, she was Indigenous, and she said, the two-state solution is what we experience as Indigenous people in this country. That's what the two-state solution is. So we know why the two-state solution, what it really means, and why we need to reject it, which I thought was a really great comment to make at that point.
It's rooted in the historical material analysis of how we dialectically talk through and talk with certain individuals about these topics. Is that you cannot look at what people call Manifest Destiny 3.0 in regards to Zionism. These are just products and extensions of the same imperialist system that has continuously done what it has done to Indigenous people try and propagate that primitive accumulation that they have stolen from society. I always go back, to what Frantz Fanon said in regards, to the colonized. He said, for the colonized life, the life can only spring up again out of the rotting corpse of the settler. Palestinians, indigenous people across the globe, can only see their liberation when they see the end of their oppressor. And as Malcolm X says, by any means necessary, but I think by every means necessary now is what we're on, facing the 300-foot maverick that is approaching us, that is called imperialism. Moving on to same portion of misinformation, of indoctrination, is October 7th. Now, October 7th to me is my birthday. I was born October 7th, so that's what I always look at, is October 7th. That and an act of resistance against an oppressive system. What do you say to those that try and classify that? And I'll ask you this question, and you've probably answered this question before. Do you think that October 7th was a terrorist attack? I don't think it was a terrorist attack by any stretch. I think it was an act of resistance against an oppressive force, and through war crimes, all of that could, yes, be up for question. But me being an indigenous person, I don't really classify an act of resistance against an oppressive force as terrorism. I think that's working within the parameters of the colonial system and their definitions and how they try and misconstrue. But what would you say to that?
Well, I mean, I've been saying this from the very, very beginning. It was an act. It was an act of resistance. There's no question. It was an act of resistance. Terrorism is what Palestinians have been living through for the last almost 80 years, if not more. That's what terrorism is. Yes. What the Palestinians have been doing all along is resistance, and what's unique about October 7th, you talked earlier in the introduction about disrupting. They were able to disrupt the apartheid state like no one has ever done before. No one was ever done before. And it's interesting, in protest, one of the chants is, we demand justice, and if we don't get it, shut it down. Yes. They shut it down. They were able to shut down the apartheid state like no one was ever able to do before. And when you understand that particularly 2 million people living in Gaza are actually living in a concentration camp, have been living in a concentration camp for many, many decades, then, now obviously the balance of power here and it becomes more clear. This was an act of resistance. This was an act of resistance. No, but not only was it an act of resistance, like I said, it disrupted and paralyzed the apartheid state like no one was ever able to do before. And there's all these theories on, what happened and so forth. But the bottom line is that they were able to disrupt the apartheid state to the point that it has not recovered. I mean, they were able to, unleash this brutality and commit this horrendous bloodletting, this genocide over the last year and a half. But that doesn't change the fact that the apartheid state has been disrupted to a point that they have not yet recovered. And the accusations, the political accusations, the accusations between the military and the civilian government, the shutting down of the port of Eilat thanks to the work of the Yemeni forces and so on. I mean, this was an act of resistance that will be written down in the history books and studied for forever. There's no question about that. Their ability to surprise and their ability to shut down and again, bringing that, remembering that they came out of a concentration camp where, a glass of water, of clean water, is a luxury. It's not that they came out of a place where they had 3 meals a day and all the water and medical care and supplies. They came from a place where a child with an ear infection cannot get antibiotics. And they live 5 minutes away, or I should say right outside the concentration camp in the rest of Palestine. All the resources are readily available. And I mean, there's an abundance of resources. Palestine is a rich country. Hunger, dehydration, people dying from curable diseases in Palestine is absurd. It makes no sense. It's a rich country. And yet in the concentration camp, that's the reality. So coming out of that reality and being able to disrupt in such a way the apartheid state is an act of resistance that, like I said, that will be remembered and learned forever. And if they weren't Palestinian, the rest of the world would hail them, would treat this whole story in a very, very different way. But clearly,
it kind of sounds like the Vietnamese in regards to the Vietnam War. Is that not a whole lot of people know the positive resistance that the Vietnamese had and how powerful that was against the imperialist mode. Not to interrupt you, but I was painting a picture in my head that the history, because you're not the first person, especially on this network, to allude to that. A good friend of this network, Laith Marouf, who is in the belly of this.
He's in Beirut, I think, right?
Yeah. He's in Beirut. Has said this, and I'll ask. This actually transitions to the next question that I'll ask. Is that we're running out of words to classify what's going on because of how horrific it is. Laith Marouf alluded to what you had alluded to, that this will be taught in history books for years to come, in military strategist books for years to come, simply because how effective it was. But he also alluded to in that same video that I wish I could have mocked up here. He alluded to that there are Armageddonists, that these Zionists are Armageddonists, and there really isn't another word to describe the amount of evil and that they have inflicted onto the Palestinians. Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't know. I think the term genocide, was coined by Raphael Lemkin after World War II. I think the term genocide, the destruction of a people, is what they're doing. Armageddon, I think, suggests a larger destruction. What the Zionists are doing and what they've set out to do from the very beginning is genocide. And what's interesting about that, actually, speaking of Raphael Lemkin, it's interesting. The terms like genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity were coined as crimes and codified as crimes to a large degree as a result of the Holocaust and what the Nazis did during World War II. And 3 years after the end of that, they allowed the commencement of the genocide of the Palestinian people. And I was talking to a friend just now, and he was asking me, what prompt? How come? How does it make sense? Well, one was directed against mostly white people, and so the white people made sure to stop it, and the Nazis were threatening white people, the Europeans. But as long as the genocide goes on against people of color, then suddenly it's not an issue. And we know this in Algeria too. Some of the French commanders that were massacring people in Algeria were commanders in the resistance against the Nazis. They saw no problem shifting from one role to the other, and on and on. There are other examples. But yeah, 3 years after the end of the attempted genocide of the Jews and the killing of so many others by the Nazis, the world saw no problem with commencing of the genocide of the Palestinian people and the establishment of an apartheid state in Palestine.
Apologies, I was muted. I completely agree with you, and you speak about the abundance of resources that are under Palestine, and how Palestine is a very rich country that is being exploited, and there are plans for this said occupation, the occupied territories of Turtle Island, and the government system that resides over it. They want to. Trump wants to buy the Gaza Strip. So I want to play this video and kind of get your remarks after, and as to how ignorant this is, but how this shows the sheer arrogance of the West, and how they believe that they can just do whatever they want, and that they're not exempt from laws, international laws. On this network, we like to emphasize that if the ICC and the ICJ can lose funding from the occupied territories of Turtle Island. How legitimate of a court are they? Meaning that 76 years we've seen the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, and it wasn't until we seen UN workers be massacred, aid workers be massacred, for individuals to then shine a light on genocide that we've known has been happening for over 76 years. But in this clip alone, we hear Trump allude to buying Gaza and saying that there's nothing there. And I have a quote by Hassan Kanafani that I'd like to play after as well, that I think speaks to the strength and the courage and the resilience of Palestinians that I don't think Trump really recognizes or will ever understand. But here's this video.
How many people are you thinking about?
All of them. I mean, we're talking about probably 1,000,007 people, 1,000,007, maybe 1,000,008. About probably 1,000,007 people, 1,000,007, maybe 1,000,008. I think they'll be resettled in areas where they can live a beautiful life and not be worried about dying every day.
Building settlements, Jewish settlements back in Gaza next year. Do you support this?
I don't see it happening. It's too dangerous for people. Nobody can go there. It's too dangerous. Nobody wants to be there. Warriors don't want to be there. Soldiers don't want to be there. How can you have people go back? You're saying go back into Gaza now? The same thing's going to happen. I'm committed to buying and owning Gaza. As far as us rebuilding it, we may give it to other states in the Middle East to build sections of it. Other people may do it through our auspices. But we're committed to owning it, taking it, and making sure that Hamas doesn't move back. There's nothing to move back into. The place is a demolition site. It'll be, the remainder will be demolished. Everything's demolished. I mean, you can't live in those buildings right now. They're very unsafe. But we'll make it into a very good site for future.
Classifies it as a demolition site, as unlivable. For someone who wants to exterminate the people, he has a whole lot of care for the land and of it itself. I find it to be ironic. But speaking of the love and resilience of the Palestinians, this is from Hassan Ghanafani, and it states that everything in this world can be robbed and stolen except one thing. This one thing is the love that emanates from a human being towards a solid commitment to a conviction or cause. When you hear Trump's words and then you hear Hassan's, what comes to mind? But secondly, I just have to ask this: how do you not fall for a sense of satire when you hear this man talk? A sense of arrogance, a sense of stupidity, unwillingness to be intellectual. Just what do you hear from that, and from both sides?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump was reading out of the playbook, the Zionist playbook. I mean, the Zionists have always wanted to get rid of the Palestinians. The Gaza Strip has always been a problem for the Zionists. I mean, I don't know if people realize this. The Gaza Strip was established as a concentration camp after the State of Israel was established, as a place to push in refugees, hundreds of thousands of refugees from the southern part of Palestine, all the towns and villages that were depopulated and destroyed. And in southern Palestine, people were pushed into this place, and it was created. The Gaza Strip was created. There's no such thing as a Gaza Strip historically or geographically. It's somebody drew a line and said, well, here, we're going to push everybody in there. And that's how it's been since. It's been unlivable. It's been a humanitarian disaster. Even as, outside of the concentration camp, all the resources that anyone could possibly need to lead a good life exist. But they were denied it, including freedom. Including the freedom to live, the freedom to travel, the basic freedom that people should be allowed to enjoy. He's out of his depth. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's reading from, like I said, from a playbook given to him by the Zionists. Obviously his remarks are full of holes, are full of contradictions, but this is, of course, how he operates, how he talks. I think what was interesting after he made these remarks, the videos coming out from Gazans, from young and old throughout Gaza. And I reposted many of them on my social media because they were so wonderful. They were courageous. They were uplifting. Again, Palestinians uplifting us. It's it's incredible. And they're basically saying, you think you can come and get us out of here? Number one, it's not for sale. Number two, do you know who we are? Do you know what we just went through and survived? And you really think you can come and tell us what to do? But basically, what he's done is he's given the stamp of approval by the United States president to the genocide and the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, particularly in the Gaza concentration camp. And what we're seeing now, of course, with this, the continuation of the genocide was obviously predictable, which also means it was preventable. So everybody that's being killed, and as actually were the previous rounds of genocide, I mean, they were all predictable, which means they were all preventable, but the world just chose to let them happen. And it's horrifying. And as for Ghassan Kanafani, I wouldn't even say these two names in the same sentence out of regard for Ghassan Kanafani. He was not only a great leader, but he was a great writer. He's a prolific writer. And if people listening haven't read his work, I strongly recommend you drop everything. Much of his work was translated into English, and read Ghassan Kanafani, because his work gives you insight into what Palestine is about, what the existence of Palestinians is about, what the Palestinian issue is about. Like, maybe, I don't know if anybody else is able to capture it as well as he. And of course, he died very young, in his 30s. He was assassinated by the Israelis. So I don't even want to say again the two names in the same sentence. You have to cleanse.
My apologies. My apologies.
No, that's okay.
As a journalist and a reporter, I try and
no, of course. but I'm saying, one is a fool but has all the power. The other one is a great writer and thinker and leader, and he was assassinated at a very young age. And again, it's his story is a story of Palestine, and his work it really describes Palestine like no one else. So I strongly recommend people drop everything and read his work. But the notion that somehow the United States will intervene or come or take 2 million people out is ridiculous. However, we do know that the intent of the Zionists is to continue to kill until such point as the Palestinians maybe surrender and beg to be allowed to leave or something like that, which I don't believe will ever happen. So unless the international community comes to a point where they care enough to stop this will not stop.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, and that's it. Not gonna. You did put me on the spot a little bit with the Trump and Hassan, so I did. I was doing a little self-reflection while you were talking as well. I completely agree. I think that in order for us to understand Palestinian liberation, understand Palestinian voices, we have to. That's through the historical materialist analysis, and using the words of Hassan and others. Layla Khalid. All of these individuals that have spoke candidly about Palestine. I mean, the likes of, Kwame Ture, Walter Rodney, Frantz Fanon, all of these individuals, they might not have spoke directly to Palestine, but they have spoken out against the imperialist mode that has affected Palestine just as much as it has as the rest of the world. I want to move this conversation over to, because it's not just Palestinians in Gaza that are being affected. I mean, they're being bombed, they're being ethnically cleansed, but we are also seeing in the occupied territories of Turtle Island, known as America with 3 Ks, we are seeing the silencing and kidnapping of Palestinian protesters that have consistently spoke out against the system and has spoke with and sided with the Palestinians. Speaking of Mahmoud Khalid, if you could speak to that and how do we as a motivating force that is for Palestine, that is for the liberation of all people, that is for free speech, that is for us being able to say how we how we feel about what we see abroad, that our taxpayers' dollars here are funding and are disproportionately affecting elsewhere. How how should we react to this moving forward, knowing that, you know, Mahmoud probably won't be the first nor the last person that is affected by this administration, by this regime, this Nazi regime that is silencing Palestinian protesters, whether they're non-Palestinian or Palestinian, but are resisting this this ethnic cleansing of our comrades.
Well, you know, after Mahmoud Khalil was taken, I put out a video where I said, I don't understand how is it that Columbia University hasn't been shut down completely. It needs to be shut down. It needs to be, the disruption has to be so severe that the university shouldn't be able to function. And the same goes for other universities in solidarity. I mean, campuses should be shut down through protests, and to be honest, students are doing the very best they can.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not having enough of the community join them and support them. So without the community joining and supporting them, their communities outside of campus, you know, they're vulnerable. They're vulnerable to the violence and the oppression and the silencing by the university administrators and by the authorities. So I'm amazed at the level of complicity of the universities and the level of and the silence by the communities. I mean, these students need our support now more than ever because they are vulnerable. They stood up, and actually there's a parallels here between the Palestinians in Gaza and what happened October 7th and the students on campuses during last year, during the liberated zones that they created on campuses. They went on a limb fighting for liberation, shutting down apartheid. And look at what has happened in Gaza over the last year and a half. Look at this slaughter that has taken place. The students came out, created these liberated zones on campuses, demanded divestment, demanded exactly the right thing, by the way. Divestment, they demanded liberty for Palestinians on all of historic Palestine. They dared to say river to the sea, which is the right thing to say. And they have been completely, you know, left alone. And who's being punished and who's being suspended and who's suffering all these, you know, consequences by the authorities, by the university authorities, by the police, being prosecuted, being denied their rights, being denied their diplomas. It's the people who are standing for the right thing that are being punished on both sides. Both places we saw, you know, acts of resistance in order to disrupt this horrendous injustice. And in both cases, the communities, people around did not support them. The world needs to stand with Palestine. The world needs to make sure that not a single Palestinian child is hurt anymore forever. You know, the world needs to demand guarantees. We all need to demand guarantees for the security and the safety of Palestinian people who are being butchered and slaughtered for 8 decades. By the same account, we need to demand guarantees for the safety and security of the students. You know, they went out on a limb and now they're exposed and they're vulnerable and there's nobody there to support them. They did what we should have all been doing. The reason they had to be out there is because we weren't, because the rest of the world wasn't. So they stood up and they did the right thing and they showed tremendous courage. And now they're being vilified and punished for this. And the Palestinians dare to stand up and demand liberation, dare to stand up and speak out against the genocide of their own people in Palestine, and they're being butchered and slaughtered like I don't know what. They're, like you said, there are no words anymore to describe it. Genocide suddenly seems like a small word. And in both cases, the world is completely forsaking these people. They're forsaking the Palestinian people in Palestine, and they're forsaking these courageous students, whether they're Americans or not Americans, Jews or Muslims. It's not really the issue. These were brave people that stood up for the right thing, demanding the right thing. And I don't know if you had a chance. I had the privilege to visit quite a few of these liberated zones across the country, and this was one of the most impressive expressions of humanity I've ever seen. I
was a part of organizing a potential one, but the group ended up going a different route, which I opposed. due to what you're talking about right here, which is that, you know, we have to stand with the students. You can continue. I wanted to highlight
Yeah,
that.
no. So I
You know,
was saying it was the display of humanity. It was the most incredible display of humanity. The discipline, the tolerance, because there are different groups there from different people for different religions, different faiths, different genders, and so on. Everything was done well. There was tolerance. Everybody listened. The way they solved problems, the way they existed, just the logistics of it. Without support from the community. Largely, they did not get support. Certainly not of the colleges, but not from the community either. And they managed to survive in these zones in a way that was exemplary. And I saw several of those several times when I visited. There were Zionists who came to cause provocation, and the way they were isolated, and the way they were dealt with, and the adherence to nonviolence, and the adherence to respecting one another was incredible. And they are the ones who are being punished. They are the ones who are now been forsaken, and nobody, the communities. I mean, some people do stand up for them, and I know there's some wonderful attorneys who are helping them out with their legal issues and so on. But it's not what should be. The colleges should be disrupted completely. The community should be standing with the students, just like the apartheid state needs to be disrupted. The international community needs to impose severe sanctions, an arms embargo, a no-fly zone. The apartheid state should be banned from any forum, whether it's the Olympics or the World Cup or academic or cultural spaces. They should be completely banned and not allowed to. There should be zero tolerance for them. It's not happening. They're being hailed as heroes. And that is a big part of the problem. And it's interesting, the parallels between the Palestinians and the students, and how they both rose, and they're both being penalized because they dared to rise against apartheid.
You bring up something that I'm just barely getting into myself, as I know through the lens of Noam Chomsky's Manufactured Consent. I've read that book multitude of times, but I like to look at it through a new lens and through the appropriate lens, which is Miko Peled's Inventing Reality. They have invented this reality that has demonized any type of solidarity with those that, whether through the university encampments, whether it's, our brothers and sisters that are being indiscriminately genocided, bombed every single day at the hands of the Israelis. They have invented this reality that paints Israel as this beacon of positivity, and it's not. It's equivalent to a migraine to me, probably even larger than that. It's not rooted in anything positive, and I think those that question that, we've gone over in this already, you have fallen for that ignorant perpetual trap of indoctrination that anybody can fall for if they are gullible to. I want to ask this question because in with bringing up Miko Peled's Inventing Reality, and media playing a huge role in the opening monologue I alluded to, we're gonna question and how media has perpetuated these lies, how they've used media to perpetuate imperialism, and how this network, especially this show called Decolonizing Media, is taking back that from them. It's stripping that away. The first episode that I had was with Matt Kennard from Declassified UK, and also the author of The Racket. And a big part of that conversation, we talked about media. And so I'd like to open up the a discussion where how you feel about mainstream media, and do you think that is a major role in why people are so refrained from speaking candidly about Palestine?
Sure. Look, the Zionists have done a tremendous job in over the last 100 years or more, even in developing very strong relations and very strong influence on the media, in the world of culture, in the world of entertainment, in the world of philanthropy, certainly in politics, and on and on and on, to the point where the question is never asked. the tough questions are never asked because there's this alliance that was created that is taken for granted. There's also, what happened?
I think your audio went back to the camera. There it goes. Go ahead again. Go ahead and try to speak.
I can't hear you now.
You can't hear me?
Barely.
Wow. Testing. Can it still be faint or?
Anyway, shall I continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And they've also developed very strong relations and managed to have an influence on the American education system at large. And so Americans receive a Zionist education. When you talk to people in the street, you say Palestine, most people don't know what you're talking about. Some people confuse it with Pakistan. And if they have heard about it, they maybe heard about terrorism or some kind of war. People don't know about Palestine. If you say Israel, people always know about Israel. They heard about it in church. They heard about it in school. They saw it in the movies. They know that they see it in the news. Israelis are the good guys. Israel. It's a result of a lot of work done by the Zionists over the years in this country and in other countries in the West. So clearly, the corporate media, the mainstream media, is already bought and sold just because of that. Now, on top of that, of course, there are all these punitive measures where if you don't toe the line, you're going to lose your job and so forth. So that's on top of that. But even on a very basic level, the media and the education and so forth in this country are inherently Zionist. So what happened, I believe, as a result of that is that the mainstream media made itself completely irrelevant. Now, is it important that they change? Of course it's important. I think the mainstream media should tell the truth. I think they have the power to change things, of course. But they made themselves irrelevant, and they've made programs like this or a podcast like this extremely important because this is where people can get the facts. And it's about the facts. If you want to get the facts, you have to go to alternative media sources in order to get the facts, not only on Palestine, but certainly on Palestine. And that is going to be a weakness and a problem for the mainstream media is going to have to figure out how to fix in the future, because who can trust them, at this point.
Can you hear me now? Am I coming in clear?
I can hear you, but it's very softly.
It's very soft. I think that might be on.
Oh, there we go. It's okay now. It's okay.
All right. There we go. I want to add on to what you just the last remarks that you just said. Is that they're irrelevant, and they are. Just to kind of give you some examples, if you haven't seen already. This, like I said before we started recording, I went to the Dan Patrick School of Sports Broadcasting. Was one of his producers for the golf for PGA Tour. I've kind of seen this act of trying to put people who, like, say for instance, an example I can give right now, and I hate that I'm even saying his name in this discussion, but Stephen A. Smith. He is someone who has crept his way into the scene of politics and speaking about Trump and Palestine and all of these, deportation, all of this. But he comes from he comes from mainstream media, and he created his own network. Now I'm under, not an assumption, I'm under through receipts that I've had, is that these institutions like ESPN and MSNBC, Disney owns majority of the news outlets that we see. It's a monopoly. They're creating essentially or co-opting what we do here. So what, whether it's Alex Harper, whether it's Danny Haifong, whether it's a Ben Norton, whether it's a electronic intifada, whether it's a colonial outcast, whoever it is, in that realm, we're all in the same bubble. As far as telling the truth, the Layeth Maruf, Free Palestine TV, which you guys can support at freepalestinetv.video. co-opting our realm of truth and trying to muddy that. I've seen, you know, in instances as far as 4 days ago, you know, Stephen A. Smith talk about Democrats from a Republican standpoint, and then try and bring in the Israeli talking point to it, and it just is, it's a complete farce. It's made up. It's made to seem like he cares. It's made to seem like you're getting a uncensored version of which you wouldn't have gotten on ESPN, when all you're doing is you're getting the same thing that Bob Iger wants him to speak about on ESPN is the same thing that Bob Iger will have him speak about on his own network, regardless if it has his name on it. And I think you make a valid point, is that they are irrelevant, and so they're coming up with very many, very much so, many avenues to try and detract from that truthful narrative, is that you are no longer a source of information. You never were a source of information. You were a source of indoctrination. And now people are finding a Miko Peled, are finding, you know, a Laeth Marouf, are finding a Matt Kennard, are finding individuals. Someone who Matt Kennard and me had a discussion about, Piers Morgan. That's a huge area that indoctrinates individuals. I mean, Piers Morgan's checks have Rupert Murdoch's signature on them, so that just in of it itself tells you, you know, how we should see things. I want to, you know, get into, you know, you've stood candidly and in solidarity with Palestinians, and you now have created an institution, an organization that stands with Palestinians. If you could speak to that, what are the motivating goals of your organization that you're heading, and, you know, what's to come? I know you probably can't specifically say exactly certain things, just due that we live under empire, but, you know, what's the positive nature of your organization? I've been following it for some time, so.
Sure, I appreciate it. And after that, I'm gonna have to go. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So we established the Palestine House of Freedom. We're right here on Capitol Hill on Pennsylvania Avenue, just a few blocks from the Capitol. We put up the Palestinian flag on Pennsylvania Avenue, and we've got the name Palestine House of Freedom, you know, very clearly on the building. And there's several issues that we're combating, several objectives that we have in mind. The first one is to have a space that is decidedly a Palestine space in Washington, D.C. So the home for Palestine in Washington, D.C., if you will, and to display the flag proudly, without, you know, unapologetically. And then to do the work that needs to be done in order to bring about the dismantling of the apartheid state and the establishment of the real democracy with equal rights on all of historic Palestine. Now, as a nonprofit, our mission is education, and we use the most robust interpretation of the word education. People need to know. Now, one of the problems that we face is that the other side has branded Palestine. So Free Palestine has been branded by the Zionists. River to the Sea has been branded by the Zionists. The word justice, and on and on and on. It's all been branded by the other side. So we need to go ahead and take control of that. We need to take ownership of these terms. A free Palestine from the river to the sea, justice for Palestine. These are all hopeful, optimistic terms. These are ideas, these are visions that talk about hope and optimism and the betterment of not just Palestine, but really an entire region, because we know that will have positive effects on the rest of the region and the people that live within it. Excuse me, a free Palestine from the river to the sea will benefit the Israeli settlers as well, not only Palestinians. But that takes a lot of work. And, you know, we have to combat the fact that people still argue whether or not it's an apartheid state. People still argue about whether or not it's a genocide. People still argue about who's telling the truth. So we're using the fact that we do have the facts on our side. We do have international law on our side. We do have facts on the ground and the reality, the very clear, very bluntly clear reality on our side. And we want to use all that in order to, again, to educate people, to demonstrate very clearly that there is a path to peace that people want to see. There is a path to stability there is a path to secure the safety and the freedom of the people who live in Palestine. That path goes through the dismantling of the apartheid state, which is the obstacle to all of these things, the obstacle to peace, the obstacle to stability, the obstacle to guaranteeing the safety of people who live there is the apartheid state, and replacing it with a free democratic Palestine on all of historic Palestine, or from the River Jordan to the from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea. That is the mission. That is what we're doing. And to that end, we are doing everything that we do. We've got a social media presence. We have a YouTube channel. We have a Palestine Connect series of speakers and events that we hold here in the building, and on and on and on. So that's really what we're about. And of course, you can't do it by yourself. You have to collaborate with other people. You need the support. You need financial support and so forth. We have a website that has, the facts and the information that people need to do all that. So that's really what this is about. We haven't been around that long, and we're doing a lot. So we're really happy that we're able to do everything we're able to do, but we can do a lot more, and we need to do a lot more, because to end the genocide is going to take a lot of work and a lot of resources.
A lot of work, a lot of resources. I cannot wait. I'm hopefully by the end of this year, I should be in your area of the occupation, and I would love to visit.
Please come, absolutely. And everybody is happy. We host event. We have other groups, other Palestine groups host events here too. It's not just our events. We have a big space here, so we allow others to come and use the space for free, of course. And people come and visit us all the time. So please, if you're in town, if you're in Washington, please come and visit. Absolutely.
Yeah. I plan to make it one of the main things that I do. I have a lot of friends that. A lot of comrades, I should say. Friend is a very shallow word. I have a lot of comrades that have spoken about visiting your organization, and just seeing how you said the connectivity, whether it's Palestine Youth Movement, whether it's all of these organizations. We have to come together in order for us to understand the collective goal. If we can get on the same platform of understanding that we want to end Zionism, and we want to start the liberation for all people, I think that right there is, if the concrete's smooth enough and you could put some, you could lay some studs down, then I think then we're on the right track. I want to say thank you, Miko, for coming on. It was a pleasure. Hopefully I can have you back on for some discussions that are rooted in just some more discussions. I can say that this was a joy. I apologize for the Hassan Trump.
Not apologize. Fine. I'd be happy to come back and chat some more. Of course, this has been great.
Yeah. You again, something, a name that I could cross off the list of individuals that I've been wanting to speak to for some time. This network's growing, and you're a big part of that growth, and making sure that I speak to the right people. So again, thank you to all that tuned in, and you can support Miko Peled. I will have the website below in the description for those to be able to support. If you like what we do here, I highly advise you guys to go to our Patreon. It is below, and there's also a ticker so you guys can see that. Today's discussion on Decolonizing Media, a 10 Media production, was with Miko Peled. We discussed Palestine, Zionism, Trump, and how to combat democratic fascism. So thank you to the viewers. Thank you to Miko. We will see you guys. I'll see you guys at 2 p.m. as Cornel West will be on, as we'll be talking about relatively the same topics here, along with a couple others. So stay tuned. Just know that I'll be back at 2 p.m. today. But today's episode of Decolonizing Media is a wrap. So we will see you guys in the next one. And hopefully we will see Miko on this network pretty soon. So again, we always leave off with like, share, subscribe, and mask up, fam. We'll see you guys in the next one.